Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good night and everybody's had a good day. I was on, of course, earlier today, and then I took a break during the day to not only get in a little bit of writing, but to also watch my Detroit Lions get jackhammered by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, in fairness, my Lions are severely depleted with injuries, but that is the game of football. And of course, the Detroit Lions took a big L right there and learned a pretty painful football lesson. But that's neither here nor there for this broadcast. Tonight, I am just looking forward to coming on here and discussing a little bit of writing and just to talk a little bit about the project that I'm working on, to get in some writing sprints. I'm still doing a little bit of work in terms of outlining and some research on world building. So I'll probably be discussing a little bit of that as well here tonight. So that is definitely going to be an exciting thing. And I definitely want to jump into the world building part to just kind of get going with that a little bit, because I just think that's just going to be a little bit of fun. I think it's going to be hopefully a lot of fun to get into that a little bit. So anything that you guys have in terms of suggestions about that would be welcome. If you know of any websites that are good resources, I would certainly be interested in hearing a little bit more about that as well. And hopefully we'll be able to, among all of us, be able to come up with some good things to discuss here tonight. And I'm actually going to pull up this thing here real quick. Bear with me here a little bit. See if I can find what I was just looking for here. All right. Let me go ahead and do this real quick. Share screen. I keep forgetting to check that I don't need them to show me that every single time. All right. Let me pull this up real quick. And let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Oops, didn't want to go quite that big. All right. So I went to this website, nownovel.com. It's a blog, and one of the topics that they're talking about here is the fundamentals of world building. And so I thought that this was kind of interesting, a good starting point. And you can see there, www.nownovel.com if you're actually looking for this. But so anyway, fundamentals of world building. So let me, I think the little header there got cut off. So 5 world building tips here. So I'm just going to go through these real quick. It says, number 1, make a checklist of details. What are your world's cities, countries, peoples, and cultures? And so for the piece that I'm working on, the 5-part series that I'm working on, most of that is pretty well set, because I'm using actually real locations, but I'm using them in a fictional way. There could be some fictional locations that I could end up making up. But again, that's still part of the work in progress that I need to figure out as I move forward. So again, what are your world's cities, countries, peoples, cultures? And I guess if you have a fantasy and you're doing world building, then it becomes even more complex, because you're talking about universes, galaxies, planets, and all that kind of detail that is going to be important to the story that you're working on. So that's all. It's all relative to how deep you want to get into it and how specific you want to be in terms of creating a world. I always feel like too much world building for me can kind of lose me a little bit if I'm trying to remember it, unless you have the legend in the beginning of the book or the map that just tells you what everything is. And so it's not that difficult for you to be able to go back and figure it out in case you forget something. All right. So number 2, include vivid contrasts. Tolkien contrasts the homely life of the Shire with deathly Mordor. So, again, just kind of differentiating them so everything doesn't sound the same. And I totally get where they're coming from there, because it's just like when you're creating characters, you can sometimes get caught up creating characters and they all sound very similar, or like they can all be the same. And that can make it a little bit more challenging here. Let me go ahead and grab this for you. There you go. There's the link right there in case you guys want to go to it and follow down. It looks like you got to scroll about halfway down to get to this graphic that I'm talking about right now. So let's see. Number 3, brainstorm convincing names. How do place names fit or create unique contrast to their purpose or mood in your story? So that's an interesting point, and that's also almost a separate discussion there to get into, how you name characters, because sometimes people come up with really unique and, I don't know, to me sometimes crazy names for characters, but I don't know how people come up with characters. To me, I just come up with them based on what I hear, or sometimes I am looking for a unique name, or sometimes there's a name related to an ethnicity or a area of the world, and so sometimes you got to do a little bit of research to come up with a name that sounds authentic and doesn't sound like you're just totally pulling it out of nowhere. So I would imagine, in terms of world building, that's probably similar principles would probably apply to this as well. So again, brainstorm convincing names. How do place names fit or create unique contrast to their purpose or mood in your story? So yeah, I can definitely see where they're coming from there. All right, number 4, avoid only large scale detail. Don't only show broader social and historical forces. What do people eat and where? So those are some of the little details that I'm kind of working on right now too. Some of those specifics when you start to drill down. So when you come up with your character, you maybe have their, I don't know, their race, maybe their ethnicity, maybe their eye color, but what are some other characteristics that are going to be important that people are going to be thinking about? And in world building, there's a lot more that you can be specific about, because people do have to eat, people do have to go shopping at places. There has to be places where you can get clothes or other goods and services that are typical in pretty much any world that you would live in. So I can totally get where they're going there. There's some things are more important than others, but you definitely want to make sure that, I feel like even if you add something later in the story, once you've gotten started, that you want to go back and add it to your world building part of your outline. And lastly, number 5, show through the senses. Unveil your world through characters' eyes, ears, noses. So it sounds like that's kind of a show, not tell way of looking at things, which is totally understandable. I can see where you'd be coming from there. But, because again, the characters, most story, like my stories that I write, that I like to write, are definitely character driven. They're definitely almost across the board character inspired, in addition to being character driven. So that's something that I can see how I would apply through here, having your characters be able to see things. And so you're showing how the setting impacts your characters, as opposed to just going through and just basically putting a laundry list of characteristics for your setting. All right. So let's see what else we got going on here. Might as well look here a little bit and see what's going on. Looks like the author here of this blog goes into a little bit greater detail. But anyway, these are some of the things that I'm definitely going to be working on as I try to put together this world building for this particular story. But the main thing, even bigger than the world building part, is I'm going to have to really focus on how I want to start the story, because I think with it being a 5-part series, it's going to be really important that I find a way to start it and have it really make sense for me. And because if I don't get off to a good start, then I'll just flatline pretty quick. So it's going to definitely be important for me to get off to a good start. And those of you who were with me last week, you recall that I got about a little over 300 words into the story. I jumped the gun and decided to start it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm not really feeling the way I started it. I want to do a little bit more work on the outline, a little bit more work on the world building to make sure that everything is on point. So I know how exactly I want to start it and then where I want to go from there, and then let the chips fall where they may. from there on out. So that's that. I am going to go ahead and get started on my first 15-minute writing sprint here. And I'm still doing a little bit of outlining. So that's going to be a big part of what I'm getting ready to do here with this first 15-minute writing sprint. So if you guys are working on your projects, then go ahead and continue the conversation, of course, in the chat if you'd like. And if you want to read, you can certainly do that too. Tell me about what you're working on, and then we can just kind of be of use to each other. So we can be resources to each other. Well, thank you, Divided by Sight. Actually, I just literally just stumbled across it, and I thought, yeah, it was a pretty good site in terms of breaking things down with world building. And then there's extra depth there up and down that website that I thought was really helpful. So I'm definitely looking forward to exploring a little bit more of that website later once I get offline, and maybe tomorrow as well, as I continue to work on finishing that outline for the 5-part series. So all right, so let's take a quick work session right here. We're going to go for 15 minutes. So that'll take us to just a little past the bottom of the hour. All right, here we go. Okay, so writing sprint number one is in the books, and got that off of there. I did throw the question up here in the chat, and the question that I threw in there is, how do writers, those of you who are out there, come up with your character names? So, how do you writers out there in the audience come up with your character names? Now, for me, I've done this many different ways. I've had times where I want a character name that starts with a certain letter. I've had times when you want a character name based on an ethnicity or a race of a character or the country of origin for a character or based on time period. So there are websites you can go to and you can say, well, what were the most popular names for characters in 1950? Or what were the most popular boy names or girl names for characters in 1929? And so if you're writing, like, for example, historical fiction, that could be really important to be a little bit more in touch with a name that might have been used in 1929, but isn't used as much today. So there's definitely some research that goes into it to make sure that you have a character's name that makes sense. That's not something that you're just pulling out that just doesn't necessarily end up feeling like it's in any way, shape, or form accurate. So that's how that goes. Let's see. Research names meaning a certain word or characteristic. That's a good way of doing it too. Yeah, that's a good point. Because the meaning sometimes behind a name, we forget about that, and that does matter sometimes. That people do, parents presumably do put a little bit more thought into that, and might choose a particular name based on maybe their vision for what the child is going to be like by the time they become an adult. Um, so those are factors that I would imagine do go into it at times. So good point there by divided by sight. Let's see. Nicole says picking names that fit the personality or meaning that relates to the book. So that's a good point as well. Yeah, that could be a significant factor, of course, in creating character names. I think about that because, like, when I read the Hunger Games, for example, some of the names in Hunger Games are a little bit different. So, looking at some of those character names, it'd be interesting to find out. And maybe there's an article out there somewhere about how Suzanne Collins, for example, in the Hunger Games series, how she came up with some of the character names. And if there's a greater meaning behind the names in terms of like what she was doing, for example, with her world building, did the names did they have significance based on the world building that she was attempting to do? Yeah, names for colors, that's another one. Yep, I've heard of that before too. So that's another good point as well. There's many different ways. I've had times when I'll be sitting at a bookshelf, for example, and I'll look at some author names, and sometimes I'll get inspiration just looking at author names. There are times, because of my interest in sports, I might look at a team roster, to come up with some names. Sometimes I just want to come up with something different because I can fall in a rut. Sometimes, a lot of times, not a lot of times, but now and then, I'll use placeholder names for characters, and then I'll change the character name later. Or sometimes I'll have every intent that that's going to be the permanent name of a character, and then by the time you get to the end of a story, you decide, nah, I don't like that. Maybe the name is a little bit too hard to read. That's another factor that sometimes you might think of for a character. Is the name going to be hard to read or long or a tongue twister to read over and over and over again over the course of a story? Let's see. I think the names triage to things of the world. Example: Katniss, plant, cinnamon, spice, snow. Yeah, Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it was it's a really unique name. It was cool though. I really, again, I've said it before on here. I really enjoyed Hunger Games, and there were definitely some unique names. I haven't read Hunger Games, the original trilogy, in several years now, and I know some people, when the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out, some people went back and refamiliarized themselves with the story by reading the original three books again. Or I think some people I know just read the original Hunger Games again, just to get a feel for what the story was like before jumping back into the newest addition to the series, the Battle of Songbirds and Snakes. So yeah, I mean, it's there's definitely I was just trying to think of some of the names. I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't really thought about all of the names. There were some that, of course, jumped out at you. You know, Katniss and Peeta and Rue, and so there's some names that definitely jump out at you from that particular story. Hey, Mitch. I still think Haymitch would, I think eventually that'd be a great story to tell in the Hunger Games series. So, Suzanne Collins, if you're listening, if you're one of the ones that are listening right now, and you end up listening to this later, I'm sure you've been lobbied about that many, many times. So, I'm not saying anything to you that probably hasn't been said to you many other times by people far more important than yours truly. So, okay, let's um, let's sprint again. We are at 32 minutes into the broadcast, actually 33 minutes now into the broadcast. So we're going to sprint again. And this one will take us to about 5 minutes before the top of the hour. So I'm going to go ahead and get this clock back up here on the stream. And we're going to get going with some more sprinting. Right now, I mentioned that I'm strengthening the outline for my 5-part series. I really want to jump into that. So I might end up putting some projects on hold or at least on the back burner because I really want to get going with this series. And so what I just did in this last um, sprint was I worked on the 3-act shell for the story. So, and I feel pretty good about where that's at right now. All right, here we go. So let me go ahead and start the clock. It is 9:40 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to go ahead and get going. Okay. That one is in the books here. Let me get that off the screen. And hold on, let me get that set. And I wanted to grab a resource here real quick to pop up on the screen. And hang on a second. Let's see. Divided by site, editing, fave, festive, family, film, book tag. Okay. I have to check that out. Yeah. I've just discovered, I shouldn't say I just discovered. I've just embraced doing book tag videos. So I definitely want to do some more book tag videos. So I'll be on the lookout for that. Okay. I mentioned that I was going to talk about the 3-act structure. So let me go ahead and add this website to the screen right now. And hang on a second. Put this in the chat here for you guys if you want to follow along with what I'm doing here. So this is the Reedsy blog right here, and it discusses. This is a little bit of an older article here. It's a couple of years old, about 2.5 years old. So it says June 2018, and it talks about the 3-act structure, 3 steps to a powerful story structure. And let me go down here a little bit to this particular graphic. And so this graphic right here kind of illustrates a little bit about what you see with the 3-act. And you can see it's got it like as kind of a roller coaster ride there. And so what it does is it starts there. Of course, it starts lower in terms of building the tension over the course of the story. And so it starts with a little bit of exposition at the beginning, so kind of setting the scene for what's going to happen. And then there's that first inciting incident toward the end of the first act of the 3-act structure. And so you can see it rises along to the midpoint. And then as you get toward the end of Act 2, then you have your rising action. And then you get to the high point just into the 3rd act. And then you get to you got your climax, of course, and then your denouement as you bring it down toward the end and you clean up loose ends and you answer any unanswered questions that need to be settled before the reader is feeling satisfied about the conclusion of the story. So here's a little bit of a breakdown. Act 1 is the setup, exposition, inciting incident, plot point 1. Act 2 is confrontation, rising action, midpoint, plot point 2. And in Act 3 is the resolution, pre-climax, climax, and denouement. So you can see it's as simple as it is complex. I've seen people that have graphics that are way more complex than that, but this is the simplest way. One of the simpler and yet direct ways of really kind of describing it. So, and you can see how it kind of loops around, and the idea is that everything is going to eventually make sense when you come full circle. So let me see if they got anything else here. It's got a little quiz there to determine how what the length of your novel should be. That's actually interesting. I might have to take that at some point. Let's see. So again, it just kind of goes into a little bit more detail right there. There's Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and so it gets into the act setup. And so it talks about Dorothy dreams of going somewhere else in Act 1 of The Wizard of Oz. And of course, it begins with the exposition part in the beginning of what obviously is a classic film. Let's see. See, it's got some related articles here. How to develop characters your readers won't forget. We talked about that a little bit more at points. 8 character development exercises to help you nail your character. How to create a character profile, the ultimate guide with a template. So I have to come back to this one at some point. So you got the inciting incident it talks about here, still right here, relatively early in the story. And this author and editor, Kristen Kiefer, suggests asking yourself the following questions to help you craft the inciting incident. How is my protagonist dissatisfied with their life? What would it take for my protagonist to find satisfaction? This is their goal. What are my protagonist's biggest fears and character flaws? How would the actions that my protagonist needs to take to find satisfaction force them to confront their fears and or flaws? That's actually a great set of questions. That is very, very well put. So again, this is another article I'm definitely glad that I found out about. And then it comes back with some examples. Again, going back to The Wizard of Oz. So for you, it talks about, actually a little bit about the Hunger Games too. Katniss's beloved younger sister Prim is randomly chosen to participate in a televised fight to the death. And then you got plot point 1. And then you got Act 2. So we jump to Act 2, the confrontation. Dorothy and friends travel down the yellow brick road in Act 2 of The Wizard of Oz. You've got the rising action, of course, the things that happen while the four are on the yellow brick road. And the Wicked Witch of the West is starting to make her play to get the ruby slippers. And then talks about, Dorothy meeting her allies on there. And then it goes back again to the Hunger Games. And I'll mention the Hunger Games because we've been talking about that. Katniss trains to survive the games. After the game starts, she gathers supplies and runs for her life. Thereupon, she faces many physical dangers before a fearsome group of tributes discovers and begins to hunt her. So, again, I like that they used an older story in The Wizard of Oz and then a more recent story in The Hunger Games. And so you got the midpoint, which of course takes place in the middle. And you got plot point 2. Our poor protagonist has fallen on hard times. So this is the adversity that you want to put your character through. They thought they were making headway on their goal, and then the midpoint came and threw them off their rhythm. So again, a stumbling block, putting your character through crisis situations that hopefully will reveal their character by the end. So let's see. Dorothy must decide whether to take the risk of heading to the Wicked Witch's castle or to give up on her chance of going home. She and her companions decide to confront the witch. And then in the Hunger Games example, Katniss works to destroy the tribute's supply cache and kills a tribute in an effort to protect Rue. She later tracks down Peeta, fights another tribute for medicine that will heal his injured leg, and makes sacrifices to keep them both alive. And then, of course, you get to the resolution, and the Wicked Witch melts into a puddle in Act 3 of The Wizard of Oz. And then, of course, the pre-climax, you're building up to it. And then, of course, it gives the examples. While on the way to the Wicked Witch's castle, Dorothy is captured. The witch finds out that the ruby slippers can't be taken against Dorothy's will while she's alive. So she sets an hourglass and threatens that Dorothy will die when it runs out. Katniss realizes that the mutated hounds chasing her bear striking resemblances to deceased tributes, including those she killed, dredging up trauma Katniss had suppressed to survive. So, and then of course you have your climax, and then your denouement. Finally, the dust settles if the protagonist's goal is not immediately obtained during the climax. The denouement is where this should be achieved or redefined if their goal changed during Act 3. Along with this, the denouement should also fulfill any promises made to the reader, tie up significant loose ends, I talked about this a little bit earlier, underscore the theme, and release the tension built up during the climactic sequences of events. So good stuff here in this article. I'm definitely going to keep this bookmarked, but I thought I would share that with you. I thought there was some good stuff here in terms of the 3-act structure. It's actually one of the better 3-act structure articles that I've actually found. So that is definitely something that you all could consider looking at. Should you want to follow the 3-act structure. Yeah, you can never get too much of the Wicked Witch of the West Um, Hearing the Wizard. Yeah. I'll tell you what, that's a great I haven't watched that movie in so long. I'm figuring it must come on at a certain time of the year every year. And I don't know. I think I missed it this year. It's one of those ones like that, and then you have the Charlie Brown specials that come on at different holidays. You have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that comes on at a certain time every year. The Ten Commandments, the movie, comes on at a certain time every year, and so those are things that I think we kind of get used to at some point. So, all right, back to the screen here with the clock, and we're at 10:05, so we're going to go to about 10:20 with this third and probably final sprint of the evening. So let me go ahead and hit the start button, and we'll get going from there. Okay, so I just got done with, not done, but I just made another big stride in my outline, and I used that article that I shared with you guys in the chat. So that definitely helped me to sharpen my 3 act structure. And I think I'm going to be in a good place to begin getting started with my 5 part series, my 5 part book series. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And that article was definitely extremely helpful in terms of helping me to just solidify some things that I was looking at and that I was beginning to work on. So definitely excited about that development there. So I hope that those of you who were participating here tonight and those of you who will see this will benefit from some of what I shared with you guys during this particular broadcast. So I shared what I hope were some good resources on the web that could benefit you and to help you to be able to get your novel back going, or to really help even put you on an even better plane. So let's hope that we all find that value in what we're doing. So it's an hour and 16 minutes in, and I'm going to get ready to close it out for the night. So thanks to everybody who came through and participated. Divided by Sight and Nicole, I know you guys were in here, so thank you for joining. And I'll be back on again tomorrow night about the same time, about 9 p.m. on Sunday. So those of you who want to join, you're certainly welcome to come through. And hopefully we'll continue to make some progress in our writing, and we'll all be able to stay on track toward bigger and better things as we move ahead. So hope everybody has a good night and everybody has a great Sunday. And I hope that you all will have an opportunity to join me Sunday night for another opportunity to get together and do some writing, do some reading, do whatever we want to do in terms of chatting about reading and writing and more here on the channel. So thanks, everybody.